We want things to be like they were when America was great and when Georgia was great. We've got to get back to those principles that made America great. Getting rid of the property tax and the income tax and replacing them with a simple sales tax, I think, is the answer. Let me give you a couple of things, positive things, that it would do if we did that. First of all, until we can get rid of all the illegal aliens that ought not be here in the first place, at least they'll have to start paying for their fair share of the services that you and I are providing. Not only that, but Georgia is the gateway to anywhere you want to go in the Southeast. And so with all the people who travel through our state, use our services, they'll have to start paying for a share of it as well if we go to a simple sales tax here in Georgia. I invariably get asked the question, does that mean we're going to be paying more taxes than we are now? The obvious answer to me is no, you're going to be paying less taxes, because if you have the illegal aliens paying taxes who are not currently paying taxes for the most part, and you have people traveling through that are going to be also bearing more of the burden of paying the taxes, that means the total amount that you're paying in taxes currently is going to go down from what you're paying right now. So you're not going to be paying more taxes, you're going to be paying fewer taxes because there are going to be more people involved in paying taxes. We, of course, also need to continue working on cutting out some of government. In the first place, the General Assembly has had to do that for the last 3 or 4 months now because of the budget shortfalls. I don't think that's a bad thing, personally. I think they're cutting out things that probably, for the most part, should have been cut out a long time ago anyway. So I think we're just starting a good trend by cutting out government here in Georgia and getting government out of your lives. There are some other issues. I'm going to give you an opportunity in just a minute to ask whatever questions that you have. But as I close, I just want to reiterate, we are not living in normal times. As Tony already said when he got up here, if these were normal times and these were normal days, the truth is any one of my opponents in this race would do just fine for the state of Georgia. But we're not living in those times. We're living in very uncertain times. We're living in very perilous times. We're living in times where we know that whether it's a Republican or a Democrat sitting in Washington in the White House over the next 8, 10, 12 years, there are only going to continue to be more attacks upon our liberties coming out of Washington. We absolutely must put a strong conservative in the governor's office for the next 8 years here in Georgia. If you're looking for the candidate who's going to be the kind of conservative that's going to wait for the newest issue to hit the news, and then he's going to lick his finger, put it to the wind, see which way the wind's blowing, and then put out a press release or two, I'm not going to be your candidate, because I've already made it very clear 4 or 5 months ago where we stood on all the issues. If that's the kind of candidate you're looking for, John Oxendine's a much better conservative for you, because that's what he likes to do. He's the epitome of a politician. But if you're looking for a candidate, rather, who's going to be strong on principle, articulate on the issues, and is going to have the steel and the willingness to stand up to Washington and say, enough is enough, leave my people alone, there's only going to be one candidate on the ballot for you, and that's Ray McBerry. Thank you, and God bless you. Now, I hit several of the issues. I'm sure you may have some other issues. I'm more than happy to try to field some questions if you have them. So if you have them,
the new passports were
raise your hand.
how fast
Try to
it would be.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the state sales tax, of property tax and income tax. Would that be a gradual thing, or would you just do it right away?
Well, obviously it could be done either way, and the truth is it's really up to the General Assembly. They're going to be the ones that have to make that decision. I personally am in favor of getting rid of Marxism as fast as you can. So I personally don't think that there has to be a phasing in period, but I know that there are a number of men in the General Assembly that I've spoken to that are willing to consider this, but they're a little bit hesitant to do it all at once. I'd be willing to do it either way as long as we get rid of it once and for all. I do think that it can be done without the gradual process, but if that's what it takes to get it done, we just need to get it done.
Right. Well, the reason why I ask is part of the argument, or part of the argument for it is, it would be a gradual thing. And then the part of the argument against it is, well, what happens when you end up with both?
Right.
A higher sales tax and an income tax. One was just kind of brought up, was brought up, and then the one will continue to go on.
And that's the danger of ever giving government the authority to tax in the first place, because once government is collecting taxes, they don't ever like to stop collecting those taxes. That's why I personally am in favor of just totally cutting Marxism off and going to the simple sales tax. That's the same issue that's really being discussed at the national level with the fair tax and the income tax at the national level there, because there are those who propose the fair tax but phasing it in gradually, but then again you're left with that same problem. You've given the federal government the opportunity to tax you both ways, and will they ever give either one of them up? I don't trust them. I don't know about you.
Do you have researchers crunching the numbers to see like how much, what percentage you'd have to cut the state government budget and what the percentage of sales tax would have to be to make all this work?
We believe that just with the taxpayers that are currently paying taxes in the state of Georgia, if we went to a simple sales tax, the sales tax to replace both the income tax and the property tax would be somewhere in the neighborhood of a 10 to 12 cent sales tax. Again, overall, you would still be paying fewer taxes than you were because there'd be more people paying in, but you'd be paying more at the actual cash register. The great thing about a sales tax, though, is that if you exempt necessities like food and medicine, then every other thing that you choose to spend your money on is a voluntary tax when it comes right down to it. You get to decide how much you pay in taxes every year if it's a sales tax. It's a voluntary tax if necessities are exempted. Yes, ma'am.
And philosophically, I mean, you didn't mention it, but the privacy issue with the income tax is just wrong.
Well, you're right. And
I mean, no one should be subjected to that sort of scrutiny.
I totally am with you. We have the exact same thing on my campaign website. I believe very strong in privacy rights. The truth is the government, whether it's the federal government, the state government, or your local government, really doesn't have any business knowing what you do for a living or how much money you make or how many chickens you have, et cetera, et cetera. They just simply don't need to know that information about us. And so anything we can do to get government out of our lives is always a good thing. Going to a simple sales tax certainly alleviates the need for a Department of Revenue overall, and the need for them to be asking questions about anything. Yes, sir.
This may just be a federal issue, but it applies to us. What are we going to do when our money collapses?
Well,
I don't want to put you on the spot for that.
Well, I personally, this past year, supported the bill that was in the General Assembly, the Constitutional Currency Act. It would require the state of Georgia to begin using basically units of silver for doing business. And before everybody says, well, you can't carry around enough silver in your pocket, you don't typically carry money around anymore to buy things with anyway. You carry cards around, but it's backed by something. Those cards you carry around right now are backed by nothing really, but the word of the bank and the word of the federal government, well, the Federal Reserve Bank, not even the federal government. If we did go to the Constitutional Currency Act, it would put us back on a silver standard for debts here in Georgia, at least public debts. And it would, it would basically be doing the same thing people are doing with debit cards today, but it would be backed by something that would be actual silver with actual intrinsic value. And you probably know a lot more about that issue than I do, but I think that is the solution. And I think if Georgia took those steps, it would create an environment here economically where businesses would realize there's a sound economy here. It's a valuable place to come.